And this is Wesley Campbell with Conversions Podcast. Again, another great day. And today we have a real treat because you're going to hear one of Canada's funniest preachers who I love, and his name is Charlie Robinson. So if you're watching this program, go ahead and share it. Let everybody know about it. We're coming to you from the healing rooms of the Santa Maria Valley in California. Charlie's coming to you all the way from British Columbia, Canada. And he's a tremendous individual. He's the husband of Shirley and the father of an emerging great revivalist. What's his name, Charlie?
Sammy.
From Samuel the prophet, because of his such incredible prophetic birth. And maybe we'll hear something about that a little later. But this is Conversions Podcast, episode 15. And if you have missed any of the last programs, go to the Shiloh Global for the app. It's a free app. You can download it, and you'll get 15 of these conversion stories, plus 15 what the Spirit is saying to the churches, all for free, plus all the programs from last year. Tremendous. So let's jump into it. Charlie, who are you and where do you come from? That's what the book of the Revelation said. The angel said, who are they and where do they come from? So tell us, Charlie, when were you born? Where were you born? And tell us about the family you were born into.
Well, I was born on October 3rd, 1955. That makes me 65 years old. I am a baby boomer. I was born in Cowansville, Quebec, Canada. So I am an English-speaking Quebecer. I do speak some French too. I was born to my dad was on television for years. He was also a customs officer, customs and immigration officer for 37 years.
Wow.
And at the same time, he was actually on television. He was a musician, a professional musician for many, many years. He was a TV personality. He married my mom, Beverly Champagne. I just talked to her a couple of days ago. She's 85. She lives in Vermont. My parents, unfortunately, divorced when I was about 3 years old.
Really?
And and when I was 5, I went to live with my dad and my stepmom and 2 new brothers. And so that was a place called Frelighsburg, Quebec. Frelighsburg literally means happy burg. And I lived 3 miles outside of Frelighsburg on Joy Hill. I kid you not.
Joy Hill.
And so I grew up actually at Joy Hill. We would walk down to play hockey, outside ice hockey. We'd walk down 3 miles and walk up 3 miles every Sunday. And
now what
you know what? I have a lot more.
Just a sec. Your father and your mother divorced. So you went to live with your father.
Yes.
At 3 years old.
Yeah. And he remarried.
And then
at 5 years old.
Were they stepbrothers?
Yeah, well, they were half brothers. So I have 3 half brothers, 3 half sisters. And so my mom's family, my mom remarried within like 2 years, and so did my dad. They both, in their second marriages, they were both married over 40 years in their second marriages.
Wow.
And my dad passed away in July of 2000. And so growing up, my dad made sure we went to church just about every single Sunday. It was a very religious church. So it was an Anglican church
in
where
Canada.
They wore the the little white collar, sat in wood pews, and they had the little places for you to kneel and stuff.
In Canada.
Yeah, in Canada, in Quebec. So it was an English church, huge, big, like a cathedral looking thing with about 12 people every Sunday. That was it. And I know you like this story. So when I was 14 years old, of course, I wasn't born again. I didn't know the Lord.
Before you get to that story.
Say what?
Before you get to that story, did you have any spiritual experiences, that you can remember, like as you grew up, before you're 14, what did you feel along the way?
You know what? I don't remember anything except I just told reminded my mom this, that when I was 4 years old, I had a sudden desire to be a minister. I didn't even know what a minister was. I didn't even remember going to church. I remember sitting in the kitchen thinking, I told my mom, she remembers I was 4. I said, one day I will be a minister. I didn't even know what a minister was, but I was going to be that. Whatever a minister was, I was going to be a minister. And I remember it was like I was telling myself, I'm going to be a minister. Didn't even know what it was, and ended up being one.
Wow.
And yeah, so I didn't have any visitations in church, at home. I was confirmed when I was 12 years old. You got confirmed. You know, the bishop came in, and they gave you a Bible. I remember that took the Bible, man, I just opened it once because I didn't want to break the seal, sort of thing. And I put it up above my bed. I didn't even read it. I think I read the first page, and that was about it. I didn't know what I'd been called to, but when I was 14, in that Anglican church in Frellisburg, they needed an altar boy because the bishop was coming in the next month. So they made me the altar boy. And of course, and I thought, man, we're all in trouble. I don't even believe in God. If they're looking to me, we're all in trouble. And so they, I would have to serve the minister for 4 weeks to get ready, right? So I had to wear I called it my dress, my white gown, and I had to help the minister on Sunday. I felt like an idiot. My brothers were there, just laughed. And so finally the bishop came in, and I'd never seen a bishop. And when he came in, he looked like he walked off a giant chessboard. I mean, just like you see, he had the big hat, he had the white flowing garments, some red mixed in, and he had this staff. And he came over to me. I'm 14 years old. And this was the beginning of my prophetic ministry without me knowing, before I was born again. And he gave me this staff, and he said, I want you to hold this. And it was this old piece of wood, and it had an engraving on the side. And he said, this staff is 297 years old. It is the oldest Christian religious symbol in all of North America. He said it was given to the Bishop of Montreal in 1840 something. He said it's been passed on ever since. And he said on his 300th anniversary, it will be retired. It's actually retired in a bulletproof case. But he said, don't let go of this. Don't let it out of your sight. So, he did his thing, and then he handed it to me, and I'd stand there. And it happened to be that Sunday, church was packed. They had kids from everywhere. I was holding the staff. He'd give it to me, and I'd hold it, and then give it back, and he'd do his thing. And then at the end, he started the hobnob, and I was stuck with the staff. So I leaned it against the pulpit, it had a round that you had to walk up these stairs, and you preach from up here.
Talk a little louder. Pull your mic a bit closer so I can hear the punchline here.
We had a slate floor. The church was so old. It was built in the 1830s or 40s. It had a slate floor, like a stone floor. I leaned the staff up. I took one step this way, and I heard a noise. And then it sounded like a bullwhip. I heard this snap, and I looked, and that thing had hit the floor and broke in two. It split right down the middle. It was like 2 big, long pieces of toothpick. The bishop looked at me. I remember his lips went white. His face went red. And my brother, Brian, thank God, my younger brother, Brian, was standing there. And I said, Brian, what did you do? Because everybody was looking. And then I took the side door, and that was the end of my being the minister's assistant. But so years later.
You yelled at Brian?
Yes. Well, yeah, I said, Brian, what did you do? Because he was standing right next to it. And to this day, I think he still needs some inner healing. But years later, the Lord spoke to me, Wesley, and said, that was the ministry he'd given to me, was to break the rigid staff of religion. And how that was going to happen was through revival, and that it would break that stiff religious thing that hinders so many people in their walk with God.
How did the bishop just freak right out?
Well, he did, but he was a bishop, so he couldn't say anything bad or yell. His lips just turned white and his face turned red.
Okay, so you're 14. Then what happens?
So, I had an unusual teenage years. I was a basketball player. I ended up, playing basketball in college. At one time, I had the record for the most points scored in Canadian college basketball history. I still have some record. I scored over 3,600 points. But when I was growing up, my drama teacher in high school, junior high and high school, was Andy Griffith's best friend. Of course, Andy Griffith was an actor. He's passed away since.
He
was his best friend. He went to acting school.
Pardon me? What did Andy Griffith star in?
Andy Griffith, he played on Mayberry and the Andy Griffith Show. And then he was a lawyer, I think, for years. Matlock, I think it was called.
Okay.
And in his latter years. But Mr. Jouse was his name, was my drama. He would tell my dad, because my dad was on television. He said, your son, Charlie, is going to go to Hollywood. He's going to be a big, big star. I'm going to make sure of it. I set him up. But when I had my own comedy, back then they had the big tapes. I had comedy tapes and I had different things that I had done. I wanted to be either an athlete, a musician, or a movie star. And it ran in my family. My grandfather was an entertainer. He has pictures. We have pictures of him with crowds of 10,000 at the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto, where he's making this woman disappear from the top of a tower. I mean, he would do things back then. It was in the 30s, and a cigarette company, I remember, was a sponsor, a couple of cigarette companies. So anyway, I have entertainers and personalities in my life. But when I was 17, Wesley, this is when it happened. I was working with special needs people in Quebec, and we went for a week of camping, and I went with this Mennonite guy. And I'd never heard of a Mennonite. When somebody said, that guy's a Mennonite, I thought they said he was a termite. Literally, I thought, what do you say, a Mennonite? Is it like a termite? They're like, no, it's like a Baptist that doesn't go to war, he said. I said, okay. I didn't even really know what a Baptist was. And so I ended up getting stuck with this religious guy because I thought he was religious for a week, and we were camping. And I remember, Wesley, that the first breakfast we had, he said, do you mind if I give thanks for the food? And I thought, man, you might as well thank me, because there is no God. I know I was the minister's assistant and an altar boy for a month. And if anybody knows whether there's God or not, it would be me. But you know what? The guy just had love. He had something that convicted me. And I remember him saying, Charlie, God not only loves the world, the whole world, but he actually loves you too. And I was staying in this little pup tent. I'm 6'5", and it was about a foot too short for me. And I remember being in this pup tent. And I begin to think, Wesley, I begin to think about heaven. I begin to think about all the pictures I'd seen about Jesus on the cross. And I begin to wonder, wow, if that was real, if heaven is real, and what if it's really real? The Bible talks about the hope of, and I begin to hope. And I thought, man, if Jesus was real, what if Jesus was real? What if he really did die on the cross? What if heaven is real? Well, then I want to go. And so I prayed. I told God, I said, God, I'm going to give you a kick at the can. I never prayed honestly or earnestly before. It was the first time. And I said, God, if you're real and you sent Jesus to die for me, I want to come into my life. And I didn't even say it out loud. I said it in my mind. I gave God a kick at the can, and he kicked that can hard. I'm telling you, it was like a piano came up my shoulders, and God filled me with himself. And I went from death to life in 1 second flat, and I knew it. Really? I didn't know everything that had happened, but I believed in the Lord Jesus Christ, and he came into my life. But the thing is, I went back to college. I didn't know what happened. I started going to this Bible bookstore and buying these buttons. Back then was the buttons, go to church, Jesus loves you, things go better with Christ, things like that. And I actually had to go to the guy at the Bible bookstore to say, what happened to me? I did this, I thought this, I said that, and then all of a sudden I'm different. And he goes, well, you're born again. I said, I'm a born of what? He says, you're born again. Here's a Bible, read the book of John. And so, you know what? I didn't have to wonder. I've never since then, 1 second, never doubted my salvation, never wondered if I was saved, never wondered, is God real? Was that just a dream? I had a definite conversion experience where I became a new creation.
So just like that, from 0 to 100 in 1 second, Charlie Robinson is born again. So now you're in college, you're a basketball star, you're funny, you wanted to be a comedian. Then what happens?
Well, then, it wasn't an easy, I'm from Quebec. If you can make it in Quebec, you can make it anywhere. Quebec is the most under-evangelized. People will go to Africa in Canada before they go to Quebec because there's this French-English tension. But I grew up there, but there's a lot of stuff going on in Quebec. You've got about 7 million Catholics there. A lot of wonderful Catholics have got saved over the years. And so it wasn't an easy couple of years. I was hanging in. I didn't have many friends, but I love God. And so little by little, I worked with special needs people. That was my calling at the time, and I loved it. And I met. So I'm going to fast forward. So through the 70s, I loved Jesus. I remember in 1979, one of the most impactful times of my life, because I actually went out in the 70s after college. I went to a Mennonite Bible school. Can you imagine that, Wesley?
Oh, no.
Well, you went to a Brethren Bible school.
Yeah.
Right?
Baptist, actually.
I went to a Mennonite Bible school. You're from the Brethren. Well,
Mhm.
see, and in Bible school, I remember the theology teacher would go, miracles and signs have passed away. And I put up my hand for everything. I didn't know any better. And I'm like, where does it say that in the Bible? And so he's like, nobody ever asked him that. So he'd go like, well, it says here, knowledge will pass away. And I'm like, it doesn't say that miracles pass away. Like, where do you get that stuff? Oh, he didn't like me. I didn't know any better. I was hungry for God and the reality of God and loved the Bible at an early age. And so then I was in 1979, I'll never forget it, October 1979. I was staying in the basement of the dean of the Bible school. And I was sitting there. I mean, I was spinning my wheels. I wasn't going anywhere. I felt backslid. I still love God, but I'm like, God, I'm spinning my wheels. I want to live for you. Always wanted to be on fire. I never wanted to be, even 3/4 of the way. I wanted to be 100% on fire, going for God. And I remember saying, I was watching a telethon, I think a 700 Club telethon. I had my guitar and I'm singing, God, help me. And all of a sudden, God come through the roof and landed on me. And when he did, I began to laugh. This is 1979. I began to laugh, Wesley.
Mhm.
I put a pillow over my face in case the dean heard me. I couldn't stop it. And the joy of the Lord, the Holy Ghost came on me and I began to laugh for 1/2 an hour. And I laughed all that stuff out of me. And God said, move back to Quebec. And I moved because I was in British Columbia in Bible school. I moved back to Quebec, where I met my wife working in the Sherbrooke area. And that's when we got married. And that's when the journey just took another level for us.
Really? So when God brought you
Yeah.
your wife, that's when things took off.
Yeah. When we got married, Shirley is I'll just share Shirley's testimony for a minute. Shirley was born to a very mentally ill woman who really, really struggled. She had 3 sons. She used to leave her sons at home for weeks. They all had malnutrition. They took all her children away from her. And every time she had a child, she would get worse. And by the time she had Shirley, they just took Shirley. She never even went home, and her mother was placed in an institution. So Shirley was in the hospital. You guys know Shirley very,
Yeah,
very
yeah,
well. I
yeah.
mean, you've spoken at her conferences, and anyway, she was placed in foster home after foster home, and they were horrible foster homes. She was abused many times until the age of 12, to the point where she was classified as emotionally disturbed, and they didn't know what to do with her. She was out of control, and so they finally put her in a home for mentally handicapped people. And the ward she was put on was called Section A in Dixville, Quebec. And in, like Shirley shared the other day, I mean, these women had, and I worked years later after she got saved in that same ward. And the women, most of them don't know where they are. They paint the walls with their stuff, and then it's just horrible. And she was in there. That she was one of them. She was when she'd react and act out, they would tie her to the bed and inject her with 100 milligrams of largactil. If you know what that is, they don't even
I
hardly
don't know
give
what
that to
that is.
anybody. Rarely. It's like a horse tranquilizer. And Meloril, same thing. And she was on those medications. One pill would knock you out for a week. She had 3 times a day she would be on these pills, and then if she acted out, she'd get a needle. She was in a lockdown facility. She couldn't leave. She couldn't do anything she wanted on her own unless somebody came and got her. But they had a Baptist minister, God bless him, Horace Gardner, and they used to have chapel every Sunday afternoon, and anybody that could walk had to go to chapel. She would go. And then one night in January, the Baptist minister took her home to meet his wife, and they told her about Jesus, and they prayed with her. She went back. Now listen, Wes, this is amazing. This should encourage every single person on planet Earth. What happened to my wife, I have never heard happen to any human being ever. Not saying it hasn't happened, but I've never heard. Because in her state, they took her back because they had to walk her. She couldn't walk alone. She couldn't go anywhere alone. Took her back. Then they let her in. They lock it down. She went up to her room and got on her knees, and she invited Jesus Christ to come into her life. When she did that, Jesus came to her right-hand side and came into her life and physically walked with her for 2 years. For 2 years, she became born again that instant, but Jesus walked with her. She said she had the physical sensation of Jesus, the person walking with her for 2 years. She came downstairs the next day, sat in the day room. I've interviewed all the people. I interviewed the nurse. I interviewed the director. I interviewed all the people that knew her then. The nurse took one step in the day room, looked at Shirley, never said a word, ran out. got the
Hmm.
director. He ran in, did not say a word, took a look at her. The transformation was so powerful. He went back to his office, called a board meeting on the phone, and they hired her within the hour. And from
Really?
that point on, until I met her, and actually until we got married and then left, she worked for the same institution that she had been a patient in for those years, from the age
Wow.
of 12 to 18. And she was, if you mention her name, the people that know her, saved or not, have the fear of God. She has now 2 foundations. I actually work with her on her foundations and work in ministry. We're married 40 years. This coming June, we'll be
Wow.
married. She has a testimony. So I met that woman who loves God, and loves God to this day. I do not know a more dedicated woman to God than Shirley Robinson. And so, just to let you know what happened in the process, we felt called, actually the same week, or within 10 days, the Lord spoke to her and I. We were in Quebec back then. I'd moved back. We got married. We've been married for a couple of years. He said, move back to British Columbia. Now we're talking another level. When we moved back is when the miracles started happening, Wesley. The miracles started happening in 1983. You can cut in any time, but the
No, no.
miracles started
Okay.
happening
So,
because in 1983,
how does it
yes.
begin? How does it start, Charlie? Because everybody knows you as a Holy Spirit man, a prophet man, signs and wonders man, joy, shaker. How does it start?
Okay, well, 83 was the year all that started, because and I call myself this. Because I asked God years ago, what am I? He goes, you're a revivalist. I said, a revivalist, because I was like, that was like fivefold. This guy was in the fivefold. What fivefold are you? And what fivefold are you? And prophet, apostle, pastor. And God goes, you're a revivalist. And I said, well, I said, God, you look in the book of Acts, you don't have any revivalists. I said, what do you mean? I said, what part of the fivefold? God says, you're a revivalist. I said, a revivalist. Where's the revivalist in the book of Acts? You know what he told me? He said they didn't need any in the book of Acts. They do now. They need revivalists. And so in 1983, I began a quest, and God, I can say the Holy Spirit drove me to prayer. I went into praying and fasting for about 2 years, not like 2 years straight. I would fast for 40 days and take a few weeks and fast for 21 days. I mean, I was already skinny, and I got really skinny. I'm not skinny anymore, but I got really skinny. I didn't care. And I would pray one prayer, Wesley, only one prayer. Every day, one prayer, all day long, one prayer. Can you imagine praying one prayer, fasting, praying 40 days?
One
I
prayer.
didn't pray for myself. I prayed, oh God, show me your glory. That's all I prayed.
Really?
That's all I could pray. That's all that came out of me. Oh God, show me your glory. Oh God, show me your glory. And Shirley and I would worship 2, 4, 6, 8 hours a day. And I'd have my eyes closed. Everything would turn blue and the spirit of knowledge would come. I didn't know what was going on. And God would give him to speak to me about his glory. He said, Charlie, Moses didn't say, tell me about your glory. Tell me about your glory. He said, Moses said, show me your glory. He said, keep praying it. Don't stop. I'm going to show you your glory. I'm going to show you what the glory of God can do. I'm going to show you my will for the church. I want to glorify the house of my glory. The glory of the latter house will be greater than the former. For all have sinned and fall short of God. No, the Bible says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. I want to restore the glory of God that Adam lost in the garden. And all these things I didn't know, never heard preached, never heard about. And then in 1984, I worked for a man called Billy McClellan. Billy McClellan owned a big truck place in Langley, British Columbia.
Yeah.
But he was one of Kenneth Hagin's very, very best friend. When nobody could get Kenneth Hagin, Billy could get Kenneth Hagin in. And then one month, in the month of March, 84, this is when things begin to amp up. They begin to amp up and amp up. In 84, I had 3 dreams where Kenneth Hagin came to me. Like, it seemed like 2 hours each dream. And I was in his home, and he'd talk to me. And he would tell me about my 3 parts of my ministry, about revival, what revival is, and how it's going to happen, how it's going to look different, how I will be persecuted for revival. I said, you will be persecuted. Christians will hate you because of revival, because you preach on the glory. They will hate you. And so then at the end of the month, my manager came and said, Billy forgot to tell you. He said, I was supposed to tell you, Kenneth Hagin's been praying for you for the last 31 days. God told him to pray for the guys that worked for Billy McClellan in the month of March. And so he was praying. There was only a dozen of us, and he was praying for us for 31 days. And during those 31 days, I had 3 dreams, and God began to speak to me. And then God began to prepare me. That's when I met Patricia King. And Patricia was a secretary at the time and for Mary Goddard, and she was already moving and stuff, and she would say, Charlie, what, you know, because I was Wesley. What happened at the same time as I would lead people to Christ?
Is
It
that when you
wasn't I'm
started
just
leading people to
soaking and more
Christ?
glory.
Is that when it
Is
started?
when I started. Yes, it actually started in '83 when I began to fast and pray, and all of a sudden I got a job on a berry farm. We're the raspberry capital of Canada. That's our claim where I live. And all the pickers were from India. They were all Indo-Canadians. A lot of young people. I was in charge of 200 raspberry pickers, and I was the boss. And so I figured if I'm gonna be the boss, I'm gonna witness. And so I had a captive audience. They'd be picking berries, and I just start talking about Jesus. And you missed a few over here, and then I talk about Jesus. And after 10 days, nobody got saved, and I was sitting there, and I said, God, who here will accept you? And God said, that guy. It's like he took my head. He said, that guy over there. And there was 5 teenagers sitting on a tractor having lunch. God said, the middle guy. I didn't know, but his name was Balwinder Bazzi, the first person I ever led to Christ.
That was the first one?
I went back into the field. It was the very first one, 1983. Balwinder Bazzi from Prince George, British Columbia. And I didn't go up to him. He came up to me and he said, tell me one of those stories about God. And I went, wow. And so I told him and I said, would you like to receive Jesus? And he goes, yeah. I said, when's your next break? And so I prayed with him to receive Jesus. The next morning, this girl comes up to me, and I'd seen her before. I didn't know it was her. It was his sister. And she goes, what happened to my brother? She says. I said, what do you think? She said, he said something about Jesus. And I said, yeah. I said, what do you think? Do you want Jesus? She says, yes, I do. Look at my brother. He's shining. That's what she said. I didn't even come to her. She came to me. He's shining.
He's shining.
And look at him. He's shining. So I prayed with her. And now I'm on a roll. Once you get 2, you're on a roll, right? Yep. I'm on a roll. I got 2. The next day, this guy comes up. What happened to my cousins? He says. I said, who are your cousins? And he points to those 2. I said, those are your cousins? I said, what do you think happened to them? He said, they said something about Jesus. I said, yeah, you want Jesus? Yes, look at them. This is what he said. They're shining. That's what he said. They're shining. Can you imagine, Wesley, the goodness of God? And he came to the Lord. He had an open, I did not know, I saw it. He had an open, like the top of his hand was an open wound, it looked like. And so he came back the next day. He had a big scab on it. And he goes, look at this. I said, oh, that's terrible. He goes, no, it's been an open sore since I was born. I've had an open sore on my left hand, like the size of the top of his hand. And now he said, for the first time, I have a scab on it. You know, by the end of the summer, it wasn't gone, but the scab, it was all pink. And you could see God was going to fix the whole thing up. I didn't even pray for him. So I had 1, I had 2, I had 3, I had 4. And then the best, my favorite one of the bunch was a girl, 7-year-old girl called Sweetie. That was her nickname, Sweetie. And she was from I think she was near Prince George, a little bit the town lower. I forget what the name of it is, just below Prince George.
Quesnell?
Like near Quesnell. Yeah, it's the other one there. There's 3 of them is one of them. Anyway, so she looked like a little doll. She had like a sari on. She's 7 years old. And as I passed by, I mean, I was in a zone. I would just tell everybody, I said, Sweetie, Jesus loves you. And as I walked, I hear this little voice, who? And I went back, I said, Sweetie, Jesus, have you ever heard of Jesus? She goes, no. Who is he? I said, you've never heard Jesus? No. Who is he? I said, he is God's son. And her eyes get big. She goes, God has a son? 7 years old. I'm thinking, man, this girl's believing every word coming out of my mouth. I said, yeah. I said, and you know what? I said, he died for your sin. Why? I said, well, people, I didn't know how to minister to a kid, right? I'm like, they put nails in his hand and they put him on a cross and tears come down her face. Why would they kill God's son? And I'm thinking, man, this girl, no wonder Jesus said, unless you become like a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And she's like, why would they do that? And I said, now this is what I said. Well, have you ever done anything wrong, Sweetie? She goes, no. That's it. You ever lied? Yeah, I've done that. She said. I said, yeah, well, Jesus died for those things, the things that we've done wrong. She says, oh, I said, would you like to accept Jesus in your life? He'll come into your heart. Oh, yes. So I prayed with her. After that, Wesley, day after day, kids would start coming to me. Sweetie told me to come to have Jesus in my heart. I'm like, are you kidding? This 12-year-old girl, her name was Daisy.
How old was
she?
Told
me to come. And Sweetie, she was 12 years old. Daisy was her nickname.
Okay.
And on and on and on. And then Daisy got mad because she said, God always speaks to Sweetie, he never speaks to me. And I'm like, is that right, Sweetie? Yeah. I said, gee, I didn't even know. Jesus is speaking to the children, having his own revival. I'm just the conduit. And so I said, she says, Daisy says this, I learned how to explain how Jesus speaks to you in 5 seconds. Because people are like, how did God speak? Daisy goes, how come he never speaks to me? How does he speak? And I didn't even, how do you explain that to anybody, let alone a child? And Sweetie goes, that's easy. I asked Jesus to come into my heart, so I listen in my heart. I don't listen here, I listen here. And I'm like, yeah, do that. Listen here, don't listen here. So she comes back the next day. God spoke to me. I said, what did he say? I was trying to find my cousin. And I remembered. I said, Jesus, where's my cousin? And I didn't listen here. I listened here. And I heard Jesus say, he's behind cabin number 6. I went behind cabin number 6 and he was hiding. And on and on. The last guy, I want to share the last person. Yes. This is a 4-year-old boy that had never heard the name of Jesus. I led him to the Lord. So because we actually had Bible studies at Hans and Rosetta Cron's house, I think you've met them. And because they live right next door and we were working for their relatives, they owned the berry fields. And this 4-year-old boy, and I remember he came up the next day, his chest out. He goes, 4 years old. He goes, these are people that never heard the name of Jesus, let alone ever went to church. He goes, Jesus spoke to me too. And I said, well, what did he say? He said his blood was strong. And I'm like, wow, yes, he said that. I mean, this is how God was speaking to children.
Wow.
You know what? I was just there and God was doing his own thing. But, we were praying with him, giving him Bibles and doing everything that we could do. But the last one. So the boss of, they call him the contractor, who would drive them in from Surrey, because most of them lived in Surrey. I didn't really care for the guy because he was, he wasn't the most honest guy, right? But he would come to me and he go, I noticed some of my pickers are becoming Christians. I'm like, yeah. He says, I'm interested in that. I said, no, you're not. You're a crook. I told him, I said, you're not interested. You're a crook. He goes, what do you mean? I said, you're a crook. I said, you take so much money from them, they hardly get anything for their picking. And then besides that, you do other things. He goes, yeah, but I'm interested in God. I said, you're not ready. And I sent him away. I wouldn't even talk to him. I thought the guy's just a crook. He's trying to get on my good side. So he did that a few times. And one day, Wesley, so I had led 20 people to the Lord. And it was the 21st day that I was working there. 20 had come to the Lord. And on the 21st day, and he was 21 years old. He was the boss of those. He comes driving in as fast as you can, and you don't drive fast. You worked in the fruit industry. You don't drive fast when it's dry in the summer because the dust, clouds just come up. And so he's driving, and he pulls his van and he just skids about 20 feet. He just on the dust. He comes running over. He grabs me and pushes me in the front of the van. And he says, I want to know Jesus and I want to know him now, he said. And I said, okay, you're ready. And so by the grace of God, we led 21 people to the Lord in 21 days. And the oldest guy was 21. Patricia, wow. That's Patricia's favorite testimony. She'll ask me, share that. So in the middle of that, and after that, I met Patricia and we started, Shirley and I would go over to her and Ron's house. The kids were younger, and we talk about the glory. And we talk about what God was doing. And she'd say, well, how are you leading people like that to the Lord? Like I said, the only thing I can say, Patricia, is I go into the glory and God tells me the secrets of their life. He tells me what to say. It's different for everybody. I go into the glory. How do you go into the glory? I don't know. I just worship God and fasted and prayed for a year or two off and on, and learn how to move in the glory, but not just, you see, a lot of people want to experience the feeling of the glory. They love the manifestation of the glory, but the glory of God is who God is. It's not a what, it's a who. And so God's glory, you can actually release the glory of God. Jesus said, if you're thirsty, come to me and drink, and out of your belly, the river will flow. And so I learned how to do that. How does it flow out of your belly? It says, for the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so I begin to speak and begin to get people saved, and it began to become a habit. And then it just went on and on and on. And I think in a few years, by the grace of God, I don't even know how it worked, I led a couple of hundred people to the Lord, just one-on-one. That was my training ground. But it wasn't just, oh, I love the glory and the glory feels good. You get to minister it to the unsaved. This, Wesley. I worked in a public school for 12 and a half years. 7 of those years, I worked in an alternate school where I got to release the glory of God every morning before they came. I would just pray. You can do this. You that are watching, you can do this. I would just release the glory out around the desk. I wasn't a teacher. I was a counselor and a youth worker. And
you had the toughest of the tough, right? You had the worst of the worst.
Yeah. So yes, this school was made up, the majority of kids in here had either dropped out, been kicked out, they were smoking too much pot, so they lost interest in school. Most of them had terrible families, like horrible family history, abused gang members, Hell's Angels kids and relatives, and on and on and on. We had the toughest of the tough in our city. And we had over 1,000 kids a year go through our school, not at the same time, but they go through because they're trying to get their, graduate, and it's their last chance. And so everybody, one teacher phoned me up and said, don't go to that school. You have no idea. I went there, and Jesus, I remember the first day of school, Wesley, I'm driving in, and I see this group of kids, and they're all smoking and spitting. They're smoking. They're all dressed in black. They get their hair, it's all weird. And they're giving me the evil eye because I'm the new guy. They're smoking. They're all watching me. And I'm thinking, oh, man, they're spitting. And so they're giving me the eye, right? And I drive in, I park. And when I look back, I saw Jesus standing in the middle of them. And the first thing I thought was, how come you're not in my car? And I look back and I said, Jesus, what's going on? How come you're there? And he goes, Charlie, I told you I like people hot or cold. I don't like lukewarm. He said, they're cold toward me, but they're real. I like real. And he said, I'm going to teach you about some of my favorites that aren't even in church. Many of God's favorites aren't in church yet. And he taught me, he said, behold your sheep. The first day, behold your sheep. I said, they're not even saved. He said, Charlie, he said, they're lost sheep, but they're still sheep. Do never treat the unsaved like goats. He said, they're lost sheep. If you treat the lost sheep like sheep, you won't have the problems that many people have, because many Christians treat people that don't know the Lord as goats. He said, they're not goats. They're just lost sheep. I had so many people get saved. You know what? There's a couple of things that I didn't do. I talked about every issue on earth. You talk about every issue in the high schools now. I talked about it then boldly. I had a favor and an anointing. I talked about Jesus to everyone. I worked with the Buddhist guy. At first, he said, you're a bigot and blah, 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 blah. And then 2 years later, every time he get a new crop of students, he would introduce me, Charlie Robinson, who's going to have 10 minutes to talk about his faith and his evangelical God. I would talk about God because the Buddhist guy, and he would say, I've seen his evangelical God do a lot of miracles with people like you. Man, I had God give me a platform. It was the grace of God. But the sad thing is, you know what? Not very many people have done that. It's why we're in the shape we're in, because we haven't spoken up at work. We're counting on the preacher, the pastor. If we would have spoken up 20, 30 years ago in schools and wherever we worked and been a witness and been bold.
So you were in the marketplace. You were in the marketplace and you were doing it everywhere.
Yeah.
And tell me, so Glory, they would, I remember hearing you tell about this. They would just come to you and say, what's on you or something like that.
Yeah. So my key, to be honest with you, why I started? It's because of that group of guys. I mean, they were pretty scary looking. So I thought, man, before they came, I'm going to pray some protection around my desk. So I put the glory around my desk, but I did it every morning for, I don't know how long. But here's the start. The first day of school, this guy, he's about almost as tall as me, but he was huge, tattooed up. So you could tell this guy, he was in a gang. I mean, this guy was the guy. He was like, they always had an alpha male, right, in the class almost all the time. You could tell who it was. He come up halfway through the day, right in front of all the kids. These kids did not care what other people thought about him. So most of it was negative, but all of a sudden when they got in the class, they changed. And he sat down beside my desk and I looked at him. I thought, what's he doing? And then he goes, in front of all the kids, can I ask you a question? He says. I said, yeah. He said, how come it feels good right here around your desk? Not over there, not over there. He said, I checked it out. I walked by your desk. And this girl goes, yeah, I felt something when I walked by your desk. And I said, what does it feel like? She said, it's like when I was stoned, but better. She says, it feels better. And so the kids would come and sit one day, like they would come and sit by my desk. One day, you guys, because they had profoundly bad homes they lived in. And just, their parents and just abuse and all that. And they would come and I remember one day I had 6 girls and 1 guy. And they would come and say, can I have some of that piece? And they would sit right next to my desk. They wouldn't face me. They'd face out. Like, when people soak, they were soaking and they didn't even know the Lord, but they knew the Lord, but didn't know him. They knew the presence. They knew the glory. And they sit there. And I had 7. I came back to crying so hard when I came home. Sure, I was like, what happened? I said, I had 7 kids sitting by my desk at the end of the day, all facing out, not looking at each other, not looking at me. They just sit there like this with their eyes closed and they say, thank you. And then it started. They started coming on Monday and say, I'm a Christian too. They'd whisper, I'm a Christian now. I said, how, you're a Christian? What do you mean? I never told you to go to church and get saved, because God said, don't tell them to go to church and get saved. They will go to church and get saved on their own. Most of them got saved in Mennonite churches, because we got tons of Mennonite churches. And they go, I'm a Christian too. In fact, Ken Gretter,
Yeah.
In his church at one time, they may still be there. He had 3 people from my class that got saved. 3 people from my class were in his leadership that got saved in my class. I mean, how good is that, you guys? How big is God? How great is he? It's not me what I can do. It's what God, because I don't really know what I'm doing most of the time. And you don't have to know. You know, if you just, Jesus did follow me. You know, it's something, I want to say this, I'll throw it back to you, Wesley, but you know, Jesus said this, I'm not here to teach, I'm here to give my testimony. This is my testimony. Your testimony is not just when you get saved and how you get saved, is what happened since. Like you asked the question, what happened since then? Like a lot of people get saved and they're like, well, I don't know, I had a job and it's good and I have a good, that's great. But you know, the glory of God is available to everybody. You don't have to be in ministry. You don't have to be a minister. You don't have to do it in church. I mean, now out here, the churches have been closed for a while. But what you can do is you do it wherever you are. You release the glory of God. And what happens is the glory. For me, I can't explain how it all happens, except Jesus said this, the disciples. He says right before he left, where I go, you know, and the way you know. And so Thomas chirps up, well, we don't know where you're going. So, you know, how do we know the way? Right? We don't know where you go. Jesus said, where you go, where I go, you know, and the way you know. Now, who was right, Thomas or Jesus? Jesus, because they didn't know here, but they knew here. It's not about knowing here. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. That was the verse God gave me in 1979 before I moved to Quebec. He said, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. We lean too much on our own understanding. And you know what? Since then, I've been able to minister to all sorts of, I won't name names, but I've been Hollywood. I didn't like. I went to Hollywood once and ministered, and I told Shirley, I'm not coming back there. But we ministered to many people from the entertainment industry in Manhattan Beach at a friend of ours' house, and her friends knew every who's who and the who's who. And if I told you who'd show up, I told her, don't tell me who they are. I don't want to know. I don't want to know who they are. I don't want to know if they're famous or not. And if I don't recognize them, all the better. I want to treat them normal. And I remember this one guy, if I told you, this guy has produced and directed over 1,000 movies and TV shows.
Wow.
And I didn't know that because 3 times he'd come in flip-flops and shorts and he'd sit there. You'd know, all of you'd know his name. But I'm saying this to the glory of God because I didn't know what I was doing. I follow Jesus. I don't have to know what I'm doing. Here's what the Bible said. And people go, no, what do you mean? Abraham said, the Bible says this about Abraham, Hebrews 11. Abraham went out not knowing where he was going, but he went out by faith because God had given him a promise. Faith requires you go out, not necessarily know where you're going. Abraham went out not knowing where he was going, you guys. And most people are like, we need to know where we're going. Where's the destination, what we're doing it, how we're doing it, where we're doing it, who we're doing it, and all this. And you know what? My experience, yes, we need to be organized. Like Wesley, we need to be. That was a joke, but no, it's not a joke. You are actually quite organized associated with these programs. But I found it's not disorganization, but at the same time, I found my leading in God that I'm more that when I'm there, it happens. Like, you know this, Wesley, God has told me the times of earthquakes. I mean, the times of earthquakes, you guys. I mean, the time of earthquake. Times there were 2 earthquakes in Indonesia, God told me. Because I ended up in, remember that? I ended up in Indonesia and Malaysia. Because of that Heidi Baker and Heidi Baker. I tried to close a meeting with Heidi. And I remember it was a big meeting in Abbotsford, 2,000 in the main room, 500 in the overflow. And I went up to, of course, nobody likes it when you close Heidi's. They want Heidi to go on for eternity, right? She's on the floor, she's weeping. So I went to close the meeting. And all of a sudden, God says, who will I send and who will go for me? So I said, who will I send and who will go for me? 3 times he said it. I told they all ran up. We will go. Heidi's here. I mean, I think there was Bill Johnson, I think was there. I think Rick Joyner was there as well. Rodney Howard Brown was coming in the evening. I mean, it was the who's who, right? And all of a sudden, the 3rd time, God says, who will I send and who will go for me? And I went to tell the people. And God says, I'm not talking to them. I'm talking to you. I'm like, oh, man, what a time to talk to me. And I said 3 words, Wesley, I will go. The moment I said them, I wanted to take them back because I forgot to ask God, where do you want me to go? And I said, and then as soon as I said, I will go, I saw a sword. I said, I saw a sword. I didn't dream up a sword and that a vision of, I saw a sword about maybe 3/4 of an inch, thick, really long. It was a stabbing sword, right? To go.
Like with
and
your
it
eyes?
Had one flame of fire.
You saw it with your eyes?
With my eyes, but in my peripheral, so I could see it coming. and I knew it was coming, and I had the microphone, the cordless mic, and it was coming with my eyes. It had a single flame of fire all like wrapped around it. And I knew what the fire was too. It was the fire of God for the nations that me and other people like me did not want to go to. And God said, and didn't know it, but we didn't want to go. Let other people go to these. God says, I'm open. He says, anyway, the sword went through me. The mic went flying. I hit the floor. I literally wasn't crying. I was screaming because I felt the red hot love of Jesus for the nations that I didn't want to go to, and other people didn't want to go to like me. And I was screaming, and God says, you're going to Indonesia and Malaysia. I'm going to open up the doors of the dark nations. You're going to Indonesia. You're going to Malaysia. The dark nations are going to open. And I was saying to God, no, my flesh spoke back to God. I want to go to Florida and Hawaii. He says, no, you said I will go. I said, yeah, but I didn't. And I'm having a conversation, and my flesh didn't want to go. My flesh, Wesley, didn't want to go. And it was having a conversation. Well, I'll go to, how about California and Florida? God's like, no, you said you would go. And then Heidi crawls over. She whispers in my ear, God's going to open up the dark nations of the world to you. I said, I know. I'm just crying. My nose is running. And I'm sitting. So anyway, I was on the floor for 20 minutes, and then I didn't hear anything. So I thought everybody was gone. All the speakers are gone, but all the people were there looking, what happened to Charlie? Now my nose is running. It's in my eyes. I was a mess. I got up, I sat at the back. I said, oh God, I said, you made me cry in front of all these people. And God said, yeah, I made you cry in front of all these people. But he said, tonight I'm going to come and tickle you and make you laugh in front of all these people. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, tonight I'm going to come and tickle you and make you laugh in front of all the people. You guys, we had Rodney Howard Brown, who didn't know me, wasn't there in the morning. Halfway through his message in the evening, he stops. He puts his Bible down. He puts his mic under his arm, and he comes to the chairs where all the ministers that you would know are. I was in the second row, and he comes in the second row. He comes right in front of people. He stands in front of me, and he goes like this, woo, and he tickles me in front of all the people, and I laugh in front of all the people.
And did you get holy laughter?
Well, no, I just started to laugh because he tickled me. And well, I get a lot of holy laughter anyway, but you know what? God tickled me, and he used Rodney Howard Brown. But here's how it works, because you know what? We need to be solution. The prophetic needs to be solutions. That's what God has been speaking to me the last couple of weeks. The reason for the prophetic in the Bible and now is to bring a solution to situation, to bring an end to what the enemy's doing, to bring a solution for the church. And so, I never told anybody, including my wife, because I said, God, I don't know about anybody in Indonesia and Malaysia that I know of. And so it would be a miracle. So I end up in Vacaville, California, doing a conference, doing the announcements, 900 people in Vacaville, a beautiful church. You probably have been there, you guys.
Preach there, yeah.
In Vacaville, California. And all of a sudden, I have to speak because one of the speakers misses their flight. So I'm speaking. So I spoke and ministered. And this Singaporean guy comes up. And I did not know that God had told him in Singapore, cancel your own conference. Come to the conference in Vacaville, and you will invite one of the speakers to Indonesia and Malaysia to bring the glory of God. So he was excited because there was Jill Austin was there, Claudio Frieza, and all these speakers, right? So he's excited. I get up, and he doesn't know me because I'm not on the bill, right? Nobody knows me. And I speak, and God goes, that's the guy. And he told me after, he complained. He's like, that guy? He says, that guy's from Canada. I don't know that guy. What about the other guy? God goes, no, that's the guy. So he comes up to me and he says, will you come to Indonesia and Malaysia? And I said, oh, man. So I did what works in Canada very well. I said, I'll pray about it. Thank you. And because I didn't know, and I turned around. And 10 minutes later, he came back. He says, okay, what did God say? That doesn't work in Singapore. You actually, if you're going to pray, you pray, right? He goes, what did God say? I said, oh, man. Okay, I'll go. And so we went to Indonesia, I believe, 17 different trips. We went to Indonesia.
Wow.
This has been my testimony, you guys. It's all the grace of God, the glory of God. I don't deserve any of it, but God piles it on. He's still piling it on.
So you became a revivalist, and God led you to lead your family members to Christ. Even your own sister, who just passed away a month ago.
Yes.
You led your father to Christ.
Away, a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
And
I led her to the Lord about a year ago. Yeah.
And you have traveled the nations of the world, preaching revival, glory, seen miracles, and you're just a life of grace. And now your son is carrying on the revival tradition.
Yeah, no, Sammy is at another level. I mean, he's you know, through it wasn't easy. He's got three little girls, and you know, he felt the Lord speak to him to go on and do a Facebook Live, and he was really energetic. And I phoned him up and said, "What's going on?" Because he was really out there prophesying. He goes, "Dad, God told me in this season people are going to lose their energy, and God says I want you to be energetic. I want you to be up. I want you to preach. I want you to prophesy." And he began to do that, and he's been going since April, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And we have an altar call every time. They've had over 1,700 people say yes to Jesus. And that's just the ones who put it in the chat. Many people contact them and say, "I didn't put it in because then we'll put my name, but I need Jesus." He said people that, or at least 20 people that they know of that have actually messaged their ministry that were contemplating suicide. One guy on the side of the road was going to blow his brains out, stopped his car and got a text from his sister saying, "Go on Facebook right now, just check this guy out." He goes on, and Sammy is sharing his mom's testimony. Sammy read the message, and he said, "I just started crying hearing about your mom." And he said, "All the suicide left me." And he said, I prayed that prayer and asked Jesus into my life." And he goes, "Thank you and God," he said, Sammy.
Wow.
And Sammy said, "I didn't sleep, Dad. I cried all night." Just the people the broken people. I prayed one prayer, you guys, when this broke out, when the lockdown came in Canada, still going, in all areas now, but I prayed one prayer: "Lord, we don't have unsaved people in our Facebook, or many unsaved people in our Facebook, what do you call it, chains." And I said, "Bring the unsaved in, please." And he did. And people began to hear. And he said, "Listen, if your unsaved relatives need to know Jesus, put them in. Maybe you've been praying, but you're not good, or they won't listen to you." So they would start coming on, and people's relatives got saved one after the other. So then what happened? We're responsible. So we had this. He said he works with a couple out of Calgary, just a wonderful couple, Kimberly and Doug McEwen. And so they do all the follow up, and then
Wow.
we tell people, just write in heart. It'll send you a link, and you can go there, and so they're discipling a bunch of people. Not everybody go. Some people, get saved 3 or 4 times because they're not sure how it works. Right? They're okay, but people are getting saved, people are getting touched, people are getting ministered to, and we leave the results to God. But yeah, Sammy is an amazing young man.
Wow. Well, that's a great story. And Charlie Robinson, if you want to be encouraged, get the messages of Charlie Robinson. There's a bunch online. Look up Sammy Robinson and find his Facebook, find his website.
Voice of Revival.
Yeah. What is it?
Voice of Revival. Check out Voice of Revival Facebook. You'll see all the previous shows I'm on, about 100 of them. So if you want to hear some messages and different things that we do, and learn, you know what? If you've never led anybody to the Lord, go on there, because you'll hear an altar call every time. You'll learn how to have altar calls and invite people from different speakers, not just me.
Yep. And then get the Shiloh Global app and go back a year ago. So in March of 2020, when we launched the Shiloh Global Ministry, Charlie was one of the main speakers. It's 2 messages or more from him. You'll be encouraged. And so God bless you. And we want to encourage you, keep on going, share the conversion stories with everybody, because everybody needs to hear how people come to Jesus. God bless you. Thank you, Charlie. Greetings to Shirley. See you soon.